the way he handled his life. Besides being a great musician, I look at him as though he was a very special person, a special breed.
It's hard to believe all that happened here a week ago now. I'm Lord Londonderry, incidentally, and this is Wynyard, a house built when Franz Liszt was in his prime. Some pianists can murder Liszt's music. Maybe that's why he's been out of favor for so long. But Earl Wild's unique interpretations have really restored him to his rightful place among composers. Earl and I are great friends, a friendship which grew from our shared passion for Liszt's music. Earl was born in Pittsburgh, America's major industrial city, so he's familiar with this kind of landscape. Tucked into a corner of one of the most industrialized regions of England, Wynyard is something of an oasis. Wynyard and the lush fields of County Durham have drawn kings and queens, prime ministers and leading figures for generations. If walls and fields could speak, they'd tell the story of the empire's golden years. Today, one of America's celebrated concert pianists will add his name to the visitor's book. And Wynyard is about to resound with the music of Franz Liszt. It's exactly 100 years since Liszt died alone and almost forgotten. The final chords from Earl's concert piano will coincide almost to the hour with that moment a century ago. Now we've just left the ballroom, the largest reception room. This room is the mirror room.
Liszt would have played in many homes like this in Europe. And, you know, one of the thrills of playing in a home of this size is the wonderful sound which comes from the instrument. The piano takes on an orchestral texture, and when there is a climax, you really get it full force, and it gives a certain thrill which you can't get in a, what they call an acoustically treated hall.
Well, we're leaving the mirror room now and coming into the ante-room of the room we've just left. It's also the ante-room to the statue gallery there, and ante-room to the library into which we're coming now. Again, we have beautiful portraits of the ancestors. Well, that, in fact, I'm never actually sure who that is. It's said to be the Tsar's son. Whether Alexander's or Nicholas' son, I don't know. That, of course, is the third mark. Yes. It's Charles Stuart, who was the famous general who put up the obelisk to Wellington to commemorate the visit of Wellington here in 1827. And that's his first wife there, Lady Catherine Bligh, with Frederick, after whom I named my son. That Frederick was to fall in love with an opera singer.
Oh.
You see.
Yes.
But he didn't realize that she was married.
That's sad.
Until after he'd written the compromising letter. Oh. And they fought a duel, too. dark room, and this is the sight that met my eyes when I opened the door. Isn't it something?
Quite remarkable.
You see, this is where my great-grandmother and her son Reginald did all their photography. And the darkroom, in fact, is the same as it was when I opened it 10 years ago. And it had been like that for some 50 years.
What a thrill it must have been to see this camera.
I know, incredible.
It's
absolutely extraordinary. And just look at those wonderful bottles there. I mean, you never see bottles that shape now. This is typical of the sort of photograph he would have taken, you see. A country house group. That's my great-grandfather there, and that's Balfour, the Prime Minister. It's very typical with the boaters and his huge moustaches. Charming, relaxed weekend. I spend most of my time trying to save this house from extinction.
Everybody ready?
It's popular with the public, it's useful, but it's also a tribute to the tastes and skills of the Victorian age. That was the age Liszt belonged to in deeds and in spirit.
There you go. One.
The Victorians loved a virtuoso performance, whether in architecture or music. I hope that all this doesn't become part of a lost age, too.
Lord Londonderry is a very special person, and he's very special to me because he loves music. He is so knowledgeable about the music, and he has a library which is priceless, especially of 19th century music, and music by 19th century composers that are more or less obscure today. The library is filled with wonderful pieces that they wrote that the average person has never heard of. And it's really quite wonderful that someone has taken the time to do this. And then his record collection, he has a record collection of all the old pianists. So if you ever wanted to hear how anyone played since the beginning of recordings, he has it. When I was very young, I heard his music on the radio, and it was so exciting to me at that time, and I never lost it through my growing older, and I still have the same feeling for it as I had when I was very young. Liszt was born in 1811 in a small Hungarian town called Rading. And the day of his birth, the night of his birth, a huge comet appeared in the sky. And it was something that hadn't been seen before. It was so brilliant that it caused much anxiety in the in the whole town. And the local gypsies, being in Hungary, of course, there were always gypsies. The local gypsies thought that it was an omen of good fortune, and they thought that Liszt, or the child that was born at that time, something marvelous was going to happen to him. Beethoven heard of his piano playing, and he came to hear him in a concert. And Beethoven was so impressed that after the recital, he kissed him. And that was like having the sign of total approval from the greatest musical genius alive. So he was off to a very great start at a very early age. As Liszt grew up, he had many, many problems, and one of them was financial. And he decided early that in order to make enough money to do the things in life that he wanted to do, he would have to be a very fine performer. So for years, he toured, and he made enough money that he was finally able to stop and devote himself to his real love, which was composition. He was a very, very gentle man and very kind. He helped all the other composers in getting their works presented. He was also a great lover. He had many girlfriends. Liszt's last days were very sad because people that he had been kind to never returned the kindness. And even his own daughter, Cosima, who was Wagner's wife, was particularly unkind to him. And it reminds me so much of a song that he wrote where the words say he would like to die like the setting sun, but instead he would die of a broken heart. And I think really that's what happened to him. In Liszt music, there's so many exciting storm scenes and natural disturbances, and it's so wonderful to hear them because they're so exciting and they're technical also. I'll play you one which I like particularly. It's from the Ballade in B minor. It's a storm scene, you'll see. And then also, Liszt wrote the first great water music. The fountains of the Villa d'Este are wonderful. And it starts like this, and it's watery. Nature had a total influence on Liszt. It also is part of his religious nature. All really great inspiration really came from nature and love.
At cherished moments like this, I can only think of friendship, Liszt, and music. I even wonder about making Wynyard a regular venue for public concerts. Notions of selling up because of the struggle to survive seem hard to entertain at this moment. I know that next year, Earl will be back here for another concert.
Oh, I think we can call it a day here. I think we've done quite enough rowing.
I've had rather enough of these oars. Pour, please.
All right, good.
Just a little sip. I think we've earned it. We've done a lot for France, have we not?
Yes, let me
France Liszt, that is. Right.
I should.
Yeah, I think it would be incomplete without the salva. Yes.
In style.
I think so, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jeeves. Thank you. Well, here's to France. Do you think he'd have liked our lake?
Yes, very much.
Next time you come here, I think you should be giving some organ recitals.
Oh, I think I would like to, but I think you will have to get a real organist because playing the organ interferes with your piano technique. The organ requires constant pressure, while the piano, you have to vary the pressure, and it destroys piano technique.
How good an organist was Liszt?
He must have been an excellent one, but he didn't really start to play the organ very much until he had been finished with his concert career as a pianist.
Hearing this organ playing brings to mind the religious side of Liszt.
Well, religion was a place where Liszt could place his very simple thoughts about nature and God, and it was such a wonderful place for him to meditate and to think about the next world. And it was quite understandable that after all of his worldly deeds that he wished to have that in the foreground as he grew older.
I mean, he always was religious. Probably
yes.
right at the beginning, that sinning on the one hand and yearning to be a saint on the other.
All great sinners are saints.
Oh, they have to be.
Yes.
Sure of that. Well, from Miss Liberty here, she's just as pretty as the original, isn't she? From Miss Liberty, we go to Sid Caesar, on whose show I first heard you.
Well, Sid used to put me on in solo spots on quite a few occasions, and I had been working for him for 4 years. It happened because of my ability to improvise. He heard that I was a very good improviser and that I could give musical pictures of almost anything. So he said, play me some rich people music. So I did, and he was so amused. And then he asked me how he could do an opera, take off on an opera, because most of the people couldn't read music in his cast. They had to fake it. So I said, well, the only way you could do it would be to take tunes that everyone knows, put them into either a Mozartian or a Verdian background, or any of the Italians, and disguise it so that the public would have to listen to it for about 4 or 5 bars before they realized what they were hearing. So the first chorus that we did in a Mozartian, an opera that looked like a Mozartian opera, was Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Because if you play that in a very square Mozartian fashion, it sounds just like any opening chorus to any 18th century opera. And he was so amused that I was immediately put on the staff at a big fee. And I stayed with him for 4 years. And when I had to play concerts, he let me go. I did it incognito.
Could you enlarge a bit on that?
Well, let me go back just a little before that. I started in radio station KDKA when I was about 14. It was the first radio station. We will never return to the extravagances in music of the 19th century, but we can use some of the basic reasonings for what is to come. And that alone will make things better. And it will create freedom. You know, in the last 40 years, the composers have written the same piece for each other. They have cared nothing about the listener. The listener is supposed to go and say, "Isn't it marvelous?" when it's not.
Wynyard's elegant ballroom is empty. So was the library until this morning when tables appeared and the build-up to the after-concert dinner began. Times are hard, but those who come will, true to the Londonderry tradition, be fed well. At the time Liszt was composing the Dante Sonata, 3,000 pitmen were entertained here on a meal of 8 fat bullocks, 15 sheep, 1.5 tons of potatoes, 1 ton of plum pudding, 1.5 tons of bread, 50 barrels of ale, 1/2 ton of apples, 300 fish. Liszt's life was a constant battle between enjoyment of worldly pleasures and a yearning for the spiritual. It's all there in the music. But we learn most, perhaps, from knowing that music like this will always outlive houses and rooms and memory.